Welcome to Three Witches and a Druid podcast, a Canadian podcast about paganism in today's modern society.
Trusted no man's races, we have nicked and cut ourselves. We've been stung by all the aftershaves upon the drugstore shelves, and our patience and endurance from late puberty till now have given us the strength to take this vow. We won't shave any longer. Our beards are stronger than before. We won't shave any longer. Our beards are stronger. We have shaved away our stubble, we have stripped away our skin. We have hacked and slashed and sliced and diced and raised an awful din. And on every weekday morning we leave bloody nervous wrecks, sticking wads of toilet paper to our necks. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger than before. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger. Now the ladies have all suffered in their armpits and their legs, just to wear those pantyhose and come in little plastic eggs. But we think it's time to show them that we pagan men don't care if they throw away their zip wax and their nair. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger than before. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger. Drum solo. Many faces have arisen and have gone, and the male ones all look better with a beard and mustache on. So the time has come to throw our styptic pencils to the floor and refuse to wreck our faces anymore. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger than before. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger than before. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger than before. We won't shave any longer, our beards are stronger. Chico of Alvin and Velcro, Wilkins and Gillette, Big Man in Maxima.
Welcome to Three Witches and a Druid, where we sit around tonight, the Zoom table, and discuss males and men, manly men in paganism. Without the three witches, it is me, myself, Brian, and I have with me tonight, I guess I should have asked you guys, what do you guys want to be calling this? Do you want to be called out?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, so I got Mark and Mike, both members of the Grove I'm a member of. It's November, and November is Men's Health Month. That's where Movember came from. I had no idea until just the other day. Yeah.
What? Really?
Yeah, it's Men's Health Month. You guys want to introduce yourselves a little?
Hi. Mark. No, I'm kidding. I'm Mark, like Brian said, member of the Grove of Nova Scotia Druids, pagan for since dirt was new. Yeah, that's good. Go ahead, Mike.
Like I say, I'm Michael, also a member of the Grove Nova Scotia Druids, and been an ADF Druid since I was about 14, something thereabouts. So I'm now the grizzled old age of 35. Woo.
Yes, that's right.
Grizzled.
So since you two are terrible at this, Mark is a standing member in the military. He's been a part of the Grove since the inception. Me and him founded the Grove many, many moons ago. You have been on the board of the MPGFA. You helped create the bylaws of the Pagan Assembly of Nova Scotia. This is your first time on the podcast, but Mike has been on the podcast in the past on the topic of Druidry. Mike is an owner of a very large, beautiful greenhouse business up on the North Shore of Nova Scotia. He has been a member of the Grove of Nova Scotia Druids for a very long, since he was a wee lad.
Since I was a wee lad.
Yeah.
We corrupted him in his castle.
And of course, we're all fathers and of unruly children. And so we're going to discuss what it is like to be men in an incredibly female-dominated spirituality. And you may be laughing to yourself, but this is a thing. This is our moment to feel like we are the minority, because we definitely are, especially around here.
I feel like that segue needed that thing from Monty Python. We're men, we're manly men.
Well, actually, it's funny because I think that's the intro song I'm gonna put. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's a great idea.
That's a great idea.
That or the fees of Baghdad shave my beard.
We will shave no longer.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite songs. So yeah, like even in the Grove, we are the minority. There's more females in the Grove. This has of course never been an issue and never will be an issue. It's just a point of hilarity every once in a while, because a lot of society will view Druidry as like the man version of paganism, and it's
the old white men with long beards down to our knees. The little hermits out in the woods. I'm getting there,
but I'm trying to grow it out, but it doesn't want to give me length. Even
you're right. We've never had a problem with any gender really. Like within our Grove, like having different polarity gives new inception of ideas. It allows things to occur that we normally wouldn't do. So. Right. Balancing those things off has never been a problem for us per se, but I mean there's dozens of books of literature where you can definitely see polarity happen.
Right.
Well, and I think to your point too, Brian, like, yeah, it's never been an issue in our Grove. I've never seen it being an issue in ADF in general, which still seems also fairly female dominated, as in the majority of the clergy, I think, are female.
At last count, I believe it was roughly 62% of ADF clergy are female, and
I think
38% are male.
I think we need to change a word.
What's the word?
Dominated. It's not that it's dominated.
Sorry, poor choice of words. I just
no. But that's just it. It's a word. It's a word that we're used to using. Not that they're out there dominating. They're populated. Our population is that much.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think that was my point. Regardless of the use of that loaded word, like even though it is very heavily skewed towards, female leadership and women being in it in general, like I've never felt that it was an issue. I've never felt like, oh, woe is me, like, I'm the minority kind of thing. It's never been a big deal. But I have felt a little bit more put upon at times, in very few occasions, within the broader pagan community of, especially where we have whole sections under the pagan umbrella, like Dianic Wiccans, and like there's been this whole long push for female empowerment and everything, which has been fantastic, but also sometimes come with a push.
Yep. I think one of the things that obviously attracted me to paganism in the first place was the actual equality. The fact that, gender plays a role, sexuality plays a role in the greater sense of the divine femininity and the divine masculinity, that doesn't actually apply to anyone on a physical sense. There's plenty of rituals or times where I've embraced, like I'm a cisgender man. I'm straight as a board because penises are gross. But in the end, like, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't matter to me in any way. And that's kind of, as a dad, I guess, something I really hope to sort of expose my son to, that men can cry and show emotion and be real. You don't get rid of a lot of that toxic masculinity, generational issues from our years past. Now, I'm really lucky because I have mentioned this before on the podcast that I've been very blessed with my parents not having those issues growing up. My dad was not the manly man type. So I never had those issues. I never had those pressures, but I know definitely other men around me have.
I totally grew up in what could be, easily termed the late stage toxic, massive masculinity of coming out of the 50s and 60s, where all of that was still prevalent.
I didn't want to point that out, but this is kind of on you too now.
No, that's fine. And that's been one of the biggest things, I think, especially when, I found out 12 years ago I was having a son. It became a real relevant thought of, what do I want his life to be like, and what do I want to give him that will help? And so there was a lot of time I spent in his first few years, albeit I was away for a lot of it due to my job, but deconstructing the pieces that I thought were foundations that I realized weren't foundations. They were just being held onto because somebody rammed them down my throat so often I didn't realize they became programming.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I grew up in a very traditional household. Both of my parents are Dutch immigrants. This kind of really came to a head just a couple of nights ago. Somebody had mentioned I had my parents over for dinner. I cooked for them, and somebody made the joke to me of like, oh, you should get your dad. You cook, so you should get your dad to clean up. And I laughed and I said, he'd have a heart attack if I suggested that. I don't think the man's ever touched dishes in his life. And then I thought about it. It's, I don't think I've ever witnessed my father doing dishes, which is really weird because in our household, even though I'm out in the workforce more, like, we have a very balanced divvying up of the household chores and duties, and we get both boys to, be involved in that kind of stuff too. So I feel like gender norms to some extent are good, and I do like them, giving people some sense of sometimes what is maybe not necessarily expected of them, but just some kind of guideposts of things to be doing or engaging in. At the same time, I'm very glad that our society shifted away from this, toxic masculinity idea of like, these are the things you have to do and these are the things you can only do and only the other person can do these things. So,
right.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of hate on for traditional gender roles and stuff now. It's really popular to hate on them now, but I think it still serves as a guidepost. And as long as everybody is okay and choosing to do some of these things and following along with parts of them and disregarding others, and as long as it's a conversation, I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, or not as inherently evil as mainstream society now seems to be telling us.
Right. I think a lot of it boils down to communication. If you find a partner who is more invested in those gender roles, then there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, as long as that is communicated between you two of sharing duties, be it one be a breadwinner, be it one be it not. In my relationship, my wife is by far the breadwinner. She makes much more money than I ever do, and that's not anything hidden. And it was a long time where I was the stay-at-home dad because Karen just made more money, and that was okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That was communicated that I would be the stay-at-home dad and she would be the breadwinner, and I would try to make dinner every day and I would clean up, and that was my role, and that was what it was. I think the issue with gender roles is when they become gender norms, when it's expected of, like, men have to be men and women have to be women. Like, that's part of the issue, is that there's roles in the sense of there's a breadwinner, there's a homemaker, et cetera, but like, it doesn't necessarily have to attach itself to a gender or a sexual identity.
That's true. I think the thing that I struggle with the most is kind of alluding to Mark's point of, when I found out that we were expecting, then you start moving on to the idea of how am I going to be an effective or good parent? And especially with the way that things have shifted societally, and also even more so within the pagan community, that even the idea of masculine energy or feminine energy is kind of questioned in some circles too, of while there's been this whole role of very important and very great female empowerment, it's also the last decade, I would say, is a lot about tearing down the ideas of toxic masculinity. And we've had these discussions before. There's not a whole lot of saying, well, what does good masculinity look like? Or what are we trying to teach our sons or show our sons in the pagan sphere or even generally in society?
Gosh, now it's probably about 16 years. We're back in the MPGFA days. We did a ritual, and the ritual was about harnessing the fire. It was a way of looking at masculinity in a different way. It was about masculinity is very much like a fire. You can either use it as a tool and respect it, or when you don't,
you can burn that shit to the ground.
Exactly. If you don't respect it, if you don't respect the people that you're employing it with, then you're just going to burn everything and you're going to be left with nothing. But you also can't not use fire. It's one of those things. We've evolved from being cavemen because we had fire, we cooked food, we created tools, we did all these things. I truly believe that life in the masculine is about figuring out how that fire fits into your life in a way that leaves you balanced and not in one way or the other, either leaving you without tools or burning down everything you're trying to build.
Right. So having organized the festival this year, we had kind of realized that we really shouldn't have a men's and women's ritual. So we decided to have a feminine and masculine ritual. I didn't attend the feminine ritual, but we had a couple of females come to the masculine ritual, and it was kind of nice. It was less of a ritual and more of like sort of a conversation around
beer and throwing axes.
Yes, but it was nice. That was a very nice sort of moment.
I think that still is a ritual in the fact that you're creating a sacred place to have open communication. Now, in this way, maybe it's not communication with the deities, but it's open and honest communication that we don't always allow ourselves in the mainstream world.
Right. And so go back to Michael's comment earlier of we really need to and want to abolish toxic masculinity, but there's not enough conversation of what healthy masculinity is.
I don't know. I think it comes down to this thing of like the women's mysteries are something that is very specific to femininity that we cannot have or that we cannot do. But then in breaking down a lot of the things of toxic masculinity and, embracing ideals of equality, there isn't a whole lot. There might be certain things that some men are better at doing than some women or vice versa. But really, there's not a whole lot in the men's mysteries. I'm using some really liberal air quotes here. That women or female presenting people cannot do. I guess it's kind of just coming to that realization of, there's always going to be this group of special things around femininity and women's mysteries that men really just don't have access to. Yeah. But being okay with the fact that we don't have anything that's necessarily exclusive or special to us and just learning not to be big babies about it.
I think we do. They're not just maybe not conversations that you'd have necessarily in a public sense. There are personal rituals that we, of course, can do for ourselves. Of course, talking about masturbation and that's not something that a female, of course, is going to masturbate. That's not what I'm implying. It's just, it's different. It's not the same. So there's a little bit. Now, of course, we as cisgender men are not going to give birth to a child. That's, I assume, sort of what you're implying with the female mysteries. That's not something we're going to experience. But at the same time, women aren't going to get a man cold. That's they're not going to feel that real suffering.
That dreadful rite of passage of the man cold. No, I get that.
No, but I understand what you're saying. There's things that are like in the female sense that are, like you said, the divine mystery. And from the guy's perspective, it's just all out on display. There's no mystery to it anymore.
Yeah.
I slightly disagree with this.
No, let's hear it then.
And I'm going to put it out there. It's like, yes, the women mysteries, okay, the whole thing around becoming a woman, menstruating, all the rest of it, or quote unquote societal woman, because let's face it, that even that definition is changing. But man is evolving, man is changing, man is embracing the new realities of our modern world, and is slowly coming to terms with the fact that, we're allowed to have emotional beings. We're allowed to have what would normally have been laughed at in my day of quote unquote soft thought. These are our new mysteries. These are us. Our new mysteries are the things that we're going to share with a bunch of other masculine energies about the stuff that we're learning and that we're not ready quite yet to be fully on display in society. And we're still learning how to navigate those. And even the networking of that in itself is a new mystery for us.
True.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't know. I think I still struggle with it from the child rearing perspective, right? Like cis women have a very specific rite of passage, their first menses, like with that whole transition to the idea of growing up and not necessarily adulthood, but then, raising boys. We had this talk, like, I think it was years ago at one of our rituals or one of our little retreat festivals just with the Grove, when we're talking about like, as like the boys' rite of passage, like doing something as a going out and hunting or like just some kind of survival night or something. And then it being brought up of being as well, why can't girls do that too? And you're like, well, you're absolutely right, but we're trying to find something for the boys to do as like this transition into, teenagehood or adulthood or something. And, I guess that's where I get with that struggle of like, we don't have something that's necessarily uniquely ours that we can really focus around anymore. And we can still do these things. Maybe the entire idea of separating out male versus female transition into adulthood is outdated, but it's something I struggle to let go of.
And you've got a point, and we've had this conversation before. You're right, where there isn't anything for the group of boys to do that the group of girls can't do too. But there's definitely stuff that the group of girls can do that the boys can't do.
Yeah, damn it! I just want to be special. And I'm being a little facetious here, but it's just kind of more along the lines of I just don't know necessarily what to do.
Yeah. While I can't text for a whole camping trip around it, hey, we can still write our names in the snow when we pee.
We should have opened this podcast up saying that, like, we're not here to debate personal identities, because I just want to be clear. In the end, whatever you wish to identify as, we have no issue with that whatsoever. That is your personal choice. We as a Grove, a group, individuals will obviously respect that. That's not what this conversation is about. This is three middle-class men whining about being minorities.
I'm not whining.
No, you're actually pretty good.
I guess
it's actually interesting with Connell, like my son, is exploring non-binary right now. And it's been really interesting because I make it a policy that every time he tries something a little bit different, we sit down, we talk about it. Why do you feel that? I want to know his emotional intent. I want to know what his thought process is. And in doing so, whether it's femininity, masculinity, somewhere in between, somewhere outside of both of us end up learning something out of it. And I think maybe that's the core. I think our new role isn't just to be the ape beating on our chest, kill the enemy, put food on the table, and build a cave to be a nice little cave. Because like you said, anybody can do that these days. Anybody can do that. I think it's to look at what's going on around us and help from our own perspective the next generation to understand what's happening.
Right. So actually, on that note, we are three fathers of 4 boys. So we obviously have a very, I wouldn't say narrow perspective, but we have a very targeted idea of what we're talking about as parents.
Yeah, but that was also very clear from the outset of this episode that was the topic of conversation.
Yes.
At least we recognize that we have a very narrow focus of.
Yeah. So both me and Mark each have 1 son, and Mike has 2, and Mike's children are polar opposites of one another. I love Owen, but he is a little bit more sensitive. He's more thoughtful. He talks and things. And Ethan solves problems with his body.
Yep.
Like a tank.
Like a tank.
Yeah.
There is nothing that
tank.
child cannot beat up. I always laugh that it's there. If I hear my kids playing together, I never have to worry about my 8-year-old picking on my 3-year-old. I always have to worry about my 3-year-old beating up my 8-year-old.
Yes. My son, he's quite emotional. He has big emotions, and he's having a hard time expressing them. Even though we've told him, like, communicate with us, tell us what you're feeling, he still bundles it up. So that's something we're working on. I don't know if it's from school, if it's just his personality, but he has a lot of big thoughts and feelings. Him and his mother sort of got into it a little bit this weekend over Christmas lights, because mom wanted white and he wanted multicolored, and I kind of got them to come to an in-between with red and green, but he still wasn't very happy because there was no orange, yellow, and blue. And this proceeded to ruin his day. Yeah. The Christmas lights aren't up yet, so that'll be another fight when that happens.
Yule lights, Brian.
Yule
Come
lights,
on.
yes. No. This is straight up commercialism Christmas.
Yeah.
Our patron saint Santa. Here in Halifax, we've all been members of the local pagan community for quite some time. So outside of the Grove, outside of being fathers, how do you guys feel being a male in the local pagan community is? To me, it's not a factor in any way.
I think it's changed. I mean, you and I, Brian, and then Mike too, for that matter, have gone back 20, 25 years in this community.
Yep.
Ballpark figure. And I mean, I remember being way back in the when I first went to Little Mysteries or the MPGFA APEGs or any of the festivals, and there was, you were the least numbered of the gender in the room.
Oh yes.
Paganism drew. Let's face it, Wicca had more books on the shelf than you could shake your stick at, and Wicca spoke very well and very fluently to the femme population, the female-oriented or female energy population. It was a way of igniting their spirit into a place of power and a place of authority and a place where they could feel alive. And that was brilliant, but it took another decade and a half for writers to get to realize that, oh, hey,
There's a masculine side to it too. Yeah.
There's another half out there that can also benefit from this, and you didn't start seeing those on the shelves until later on.
So I don't know, but growing up with it, and even though men were less represented in the faith overall, I still feel like we had a lot of strong male personalities that were like kind of in the forefront. So like I never really, even though there were always more women than men generally, like in circle or in like different like pub moots and meet and greets and stuff, I always found generally that it was pretty well balanced, and you just get the occasional asshole that would try and overtalk everybody, but aside from that, it would still be fairly balanced and everybody be, for the most part, respectful, even if a little bit egotistic.
A lot of the teachers or a lot of the mentors that I started with on my journey into paganism were predominantly female, coming out of the whole midwifing and the local modern healers and stuff like that. That was a role that they took and they kept and they held on to it with all their might. They were the wise women. And if you wanted information, you went to them. You went to the wise women. And that was how a lot of us got indoctrinated into paganism, because on the other side of it at the time, let's face it, the guys who were in it, a lot of them were singing the guruism songs.
Oh, yes.
Look at me, I'm important, make love to me. If you want to be in this group, you have to do all these things and I have to be the center. Like, okay, I can see how a lot of people would push away from that.
Yeah.
We don't need that crap. That's just
right.
toxic stupidity more than anything else.
Most of those people are, I'd say, not with us anymore. They've left the community for a variety of reasons.
And that's a great thing, whether it was on the end of somebody's boot or the first bus out of town for other reasons. Happy they're gone.
Yeah.
But like I said, at the same point, we went to people who had knowledge, and for the predominant of it, paganism was female driven, and it was, they were the ones with the keys to the doors.
Yep.
Yeah, I never really felt put out or put upon by that fact either. And I think actually, now that I'm thinking about this from an outside perspective, especially where the roots of a lot of like the Wiccan movement and everything was very female empowerment focused, a lot of the men that were attracted to pagan circles, for the most part, were usually people that were a little bit more balanced or a little bit more in touch with that feminine side, as opposed to, the raging patriarchy kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I never really saw a lot of that. And not to say that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying, like, I didn't personally experience a ton of that. To that point, it's just kind of funny when you're kind of thrown back into something else outside of the pagan sphere. So recently for Remembrance Day here at home, because the weather was pretty poor in our area, and most of the remaining veterans that are in our local Legion branch are quite elderly and have a number of health concerns. So what's happened this year, as in past years, if the weather's really bad or it's freezing cold, Remembrance Day ceremony goes into the local church, which is not super fun, but it's generally a kind and welcoming environment for the most part. But it led to some interesting discussions because, I'm sitting there with my son and trying to just get him to shut up for the little bit so that he can focus on, the somber, relevant parts of the day. And, then, of course, because it's in the church and we're in rural Nova Scotia, it gets a little bit more Christian focused, and there's a couple of readings, and then just a little bit. Yeah. But there's readings and, the pastor's getting up there and doing some stuff. And so then it actually led to some good discussions with, and afterwards of like, what's a pastor? You're like, oh yeah. So, okay, in their church, buddy, like, they don't just kind of do things by consensus, and they don't build ritual the way they do. They have one person that stands at the front, and this is the one that's supposed to know more than the other people and teaches people or guides them, as opposed to the way, we do religious ceremonies where it's like all of us together. So it was just interesting to see some of those dynamic changes in kind of a Christian sense and in like a wider rural Nova Scotian community when it's kind of outside of our norm. It's interesting to see how we get kind of pushed back into that thing of quiet watching, because this is not for us as pagans. This is assuming that everybody is cis white Christian.
Yeah. Right. That's fair. So thank you both very much for humoring me in this episode. I think it's definitely a topic we'll hit upon again in the future. So be prepared. I'll spring it on you last minute, just like I did to Michael tonight.
As always.
And, yeah.
Welcome, dear listeners, to Three Witches and a Druid podcast, Season 4. We're filled with gratitude for your continuous support and positive energy. Your enthusiasm has fueled our mystical endeavors, and it has been a wonderful journey. Be sure to join us for more adventures with our Patreon, where you can directly support Three Witches and a Druid. Your contributions will help us to continue to create high-quality content, bring in fascinating guests, and explore even more magical topics. To our current Patreon supporters, we send out a heartfelt thank you. Your faith in our mission is truly appreciated. And today we shout out Sierra, Star, Gary, Sybil, Catherine, Nicole, Tomlin, Samantha, Chris, Eric, Karen, Highland Horde, Danny, Sarah, Kay, Linda, and Jennifer. And to those who are considering joining our Patreon family, we invite you to take that next step and become a part of our mystical circle. By subscribing to our Patreon, you'll gain access to exclusive bonus episodes, behind-the-scene content, and a closer connection with us in our magical community. It's more than just support. It's a way to deepen your own spiritual journey and enhance your magical practice. So whether you've been with us from the very beginning or you're just joining us in this magical realm, we welcome you to our Patreon and look forward to sharing more mystical experiences together. As we celebrate these 4 enchanting years and take this exciting next step into the future, we say thank you, dear listeners. Your presence has truly made this podcast a sacred space for learning, growing, and connecting with the universe. And we thank you for being a part of this enchanting community.
So I want to thank you for joining us. We do a little thing. You guys don't have to repeat if you want. Merry meet.
Merry part.
Merry meet again. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
This has been 3 Witches and a Druid podcast. Thanks for listening.